Carson Price for Wednesday, February 5th, 2025, coming to you from the Nation Network studio, built by Arbor Lee, here at the historic Wall Center. In this program, a presentation of Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets. So, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION when opening that account. Matt Sekeres alongside guest co-host Patrick Johnston of the Province and Post Media, filling in for Blake. Four-time Juno Award winner Mike Rogerson, hitting switches, conducting things. We got a big program planned for you. First, thank you for sitting in. You're here today. You're here tomorrow. You should turn your mic on. Mike can operate your mic.
No, I can do this myself.
You're a veteran now, Patrick, both of co-hosting this show and Rink-Wide Vancouver. You know the studio. You know where the mic's located.
to protect myself from banging away on my keyboard. You're always telling me.
Yes.
I'm learning.
He's such a great multitasker, this one. He's getting all sorts of things done for his newspaper work, his website work, his parenting from afar.
No, they're at school. I don't have to do that.
You're a five-tool guy.
For several hours.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Appreciate you making time here for me this week. We will start with the Surrey Mitsubishi poll question. Do you believe Elias Pettersson will get his game back? You can vote yes. You can vote no. You can vote not in Vancouver. Do so at the Carson Price X and YouTube channels. I ask you, sir, where do you stand here?
Well, selfishly, I'm voting yes, because it's more interesting. The Vancouver Canucks are a more interesting team to cover when Elias Pettersson is on his game. And listen, I still stick with the idea. I mean, I know it's been a year, but I still stick with the idea that the totality of what we saw over the first, I've lost track of the math, 6 years of his career, 5.5 years of his career, that is the player he is, and it is not the player he has been for the last year. So I am voting yes, he will get his game back.
What do you think has been up?
Well, I mean, I appreciate that Jay Fresh broke down last season because the velocity. Well,
he did so via speed burst. So let's get that graphic up, Mike. Let me just read it, and then you can
go for it. Yeah.
As Jay Fresh notes, he's never been a burner, right? He is more a Sedin-style player. He doesn't make his hay with speed, but 20-mile-plus-per-hour speed bursts. The two seasons between 21 and 23, it was 5.6, 5.7 per 60 minutes.
Right.
First half of last year was down a little bit, 5.1, but still in the ballpark. Second half of last season, it was 3.7. That is the number for this year as well. So it's like 1.5 speed bursts
fewer
of 20, fewer of 20+ mile per hour per 60. Is this what Taka means when he says moving his feet? Because that's more than just moving your feet.
I mean, the added context of this, and because I know this well because I wrote this last week, is if you go back to 22-23, so before last year where things fell off halfway through the year, he in terms of total bursts over the course of the season, in this top end range, he had 155 over the whole season, which put him in the 88th percentile. So you're right, not like elite super fast, but pretty quick. His top skating speed put him in the 94th percentile. Like he had moments where he would. I mean, we've seen him skate. He was in the fastest skating competition. Like we've seen him go. So I will push back a little bit on the idea that he's this, a Sedin type skater.
Okay.
He's not graceful. We know this, but he certainly had moments of acceleration, moments of pull away, and we just haven't seen that in quite some time. Now, he did suggest last year that he was dealing with some tendonitis, but more broadly, it seems clear that I think it comes back to how he's being defended. I think we'll talk some more about this with Frank Corrado.
Yes, we will. Yeah,
but. To me, certainly the implication has been that, I mean, we've heard about, criticism of preparation, criticisms of how he approaches the season, how he approaches himself in season. He's no target. Like, he is a well-known commodity as a star player in this league, and teams, I think, have really dialed in. And we saw, I think, quite a bit last year with especially in Nashville. Teams are really dialed in. You get in tight on him, You take his space away, and he cannot get away from you.
And they're going to be more dialed in on him, and we're going to get to the big victory over Colorado here. Needless to say, the Canucks really needed that. But, of course, the massive question after the JT Miller trade and all the activity on Friday is Elias Pettersson. Can he get back to being a number one centerman? Because if he can't, the Canucks don't have much of a future, either near term or long term, because then you're on the market for one, if not two top centermen, and getting one is hard enough in and of itself.
Yeah.
I was interested to see, because JT Miller has been the matchup centerman often. I was interested to see if Pettersson, the 200-foot future Selke candidate, right, would be the matchup guy. Well, he starts with DeBrusk and Brock Besser. They are outshot 8-1 in the first period, and not against Nathan McKinnon's line. Like, it'd be one thing if it was against McKinnon's line, but it wasn't. It was the Suter-Sherwood-Joshua line that he's using more of a matchup. And look, many things can change here going forward. But were you surprised that he hasn't been given sort of the JT Miller tasks and assignments defensively here? In the very small sample, it should be noted, since.
Yeah, I mean, I found myself wondering if it was as much as anything trying to just give him one thing to focus on and getting his offensive game up. Because we know that he's a strong defensive player. That's always been the case. And if you're looking at Jay Pat and I talked a lot about this on Rink White last night, but the Avs have kind of gone away from being a very deep team. They're very top heavy. So there's ways to.
Yes,
there's at least the theory I think we got from Talkett to start with was that they were going to try to spot their best offensive line away from
thinking
that matchup.
they could get a matchup there.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
fair enough.
But you're right. I mean, it's a short sample. It is worth something. It is something to monitor as we go forward.
We'll see if he gets the Macklin Celebrini assignments Thursday in San Jose.
Overall, the Canucks have been an incredibly strong defensive team.
Yes, they have.
Fifth fewest shot attempts against the entire NHL this season. By the way, Sharks the worst in that metric.
And of course, Sublime in that category last year too.
Yeah, and that's the focus. We know the focus is on the game, but the whole system. And we had a good chat with Rick Talkett about this yesterday. But the whole system. I mean, it's clear as day with the addition of Drew O'Connor and Filip Chytil and the way they've been able to attack space. But this is the system has been designed for their centers to make moves into the center of the ice. Elias Pettersson has not done that, and that has been the biggest challenge for him this season. And that continues to be the thing to watch.
I was really starting to like his game last week on that all-Swedish line with Höglander and Karlsson. And Nils Åman has been called up from Abbotsford today. Linus Karlsson is going down. Nils Åman has actually played very well in Abbotsford since going down. I know there were some people who thought, okay, maybe that's the last we see of Nils Åman. No, he has earned his way back up here. I got to say, I don't love him with Brock Besser because I just think you're a little too slow with those two together.
Yeah.
And that line was split up after the first period and after they struggled so much. Just before we leave Pettersson, and look, I suspect you're of the minds that they are going to take some time here. There's no knee-jerk shotgun trade coming of Elias Pettersson.
I don't think so. I think they're
outside chance of deadline.
Yeah, I think there's. It definitely is a never say never situation.
Sure.
Certainly my impression is that, in everything you hear, is that they've invested in the player, right? Like they if they had concerns, they wouldn't have signed him. They would have traded. I mean, they almost.
Well, as Rutherford said to Gary Mason, though, even if you're better off with the player signed, asset-wise.
Sure. But in the end, last year, I mean, they made a choice. They said, this is the other guy. It's similar to what I said about Miller. They made a choice with Miller. Miller was the guy they wanted to go forward with. Pettersson is the guy they want to go forward with.
Yeah.
And so they're going to see. They want to see him find his way back to what they believe and know he is.
Yeah. Well, we're almost a month to the NHL trade deadline on March 7th. They have time. I suspect they will use it. And, of course, they have more time after that. The no-move clause kicks in July 1st. If there's a world where you play this season out and then make the determination whenever your season ends, I can absolutely see that. Farhan was here yesterday saying, I'm not sure Rutherford and Talkett are convinced that this is a centerpiece on a championship team.
No.
Do you concur?
Well, why wouldn't they be skeptical given what they've seen over the past year? It's been a big test of the player, and the player has not stood up in the way they want him to stand up. That does not surprise me at all. That would be very much in line with what I would think as well.
Darren Dreger was here on Monday saying, hey, take a look at the Philadelphia Flyers now. They have cap space. They have need for a center iceman after moving Morgan Frost to the Calgary Flames. I see Frank Saravelli also connecting Philadelphia as a suitor for Elias Pettersson if and when the Canucks are getting around to trade him. We've heard Buffalo, Columbus, Ottawa also amongst the interested parties there. Our friends at Surrey Mitsubishi have extended an exclusive offer to the Carson Price audience. If you've been turned down for financing in other dealerships, Surrey Mitsubishi has dedicated a representative, Jessica, who's going to help you get approved through their in-house financing program. Bad credit, negative equity on your current car. Jessica going to apply the special program, do everything in her power to help you get approved. Email Jessica at surreymitsubishi.com. It's Jessica at surreymitsubishi.com. Make sure you mention Carson Price. Some conditions apply. Surrey Mitsubishi, 13820 104th Avenue in Surrey. Time now for our top story. It's brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing, Foolish Winery. The joy is back as newcomers once again perform, this time in a 3-0 victory over the Colorado Avalanche. And that joy is most needed, Patrick, because of the potential for the dressing room divide after the JT Miller trade. I think the enthusiasm of Filip and others may have just neutered any kind of potential divide.
I had a lovely chat with all three new. Well, I didn't.
What did they tell you?
Well, they're happy to be here. I mean, each conversation was insightful. I mean, Filip was delighted about scoring the goal, and he just smiled and his face lit up. Drew O'Connor admitted his head was still spinning a little bit because they got in late on Saturday and kind of woke up and were taken to their new home and at Rogers Arena and.
First time O'Connor's been traded.
First time he's been traded.
Well, first time Chytil too.
Yeah,
Rangers draft pick.
Yeah, but for O'Connor, like the Penguins was the team he signed with. Like it was. I think I didn't ask him, but like it was a player. Drew O'Connor is a player that Jim Rutherford had mentioned to me in the past as a guy that as an example of the player that they found as a collegiate free agent and turned into something. Friendly guy, skates hard, and he's very much the kind of player that they want. And then Marcus Pettersson, I've got a story coming up today about the way the defense is being reshaped, even with Quinn Hughes absent. And Marcus Pettersson obviously is playing a big role in that, the ability to break the puck out. But we just talked about just his game and who he is and how he's always tried to be. I mean, this guy that's steady with the puck and knows you got to move it fast. And I've heard it in other sports. But that nothing moves as fast as the puck, right? That's the you want
fastest game on earth. They used to call it.
But the puck, but you want to, how do you get your game moving faster? Well, move the puck faster, and that's very much something that the Canucks have struggled to do, in terms of the rush, breaking the puck out, and then even in the zone that they tend to get things stalled out at the blue line, and a player like Marcus Pettersson, they are hoping will help lead them to where Rick Tocchet wants them to be.
Quinn Hughes misses a second consecutive game, and in his absence, Filip Hronek is outstanding. He leads the charge with 2 assists, creating both goals with breakout passes. Well, the non-empty netter goals with breakout passes. Both the new forwards register points against Colorado. DeBrusk adds 2 points. That's now 4 points in his last 5 after going pointless in 9. Brock Besser scores his first in 6, just 3 so far in the new year for Brock. Thatcher Demko, his first shutout of the season. The Canucks have 6 shutouts this year. Thank you, Kevin Lankinen. But 25 saves for Demko, his first shutout of the season. That glorious sequence in the second with all the glove saves and the let's go Demko chants. He was asked about that in the post game, and here's what he had to say.
For sure. I mean, luckily there was a TV timeout, so I was trying to catch my breath. But yeah, I mean, it's great to hear, and obviously we're trying to. I know it's later in the year, but we're trying to establish that home ice, and we take a lot of pride playing here, and we've struggled at times this year stringing games together, but I don't want them to feel like for a single second that we don't take pride and we're not aware of the impact that they have on the game.
Very good of him to acknowledge that, the poor home record and the paying customer. He also would go on to say that he was really happy, really proud of the way they handled the McKinnon-Natchez line. Of course, so much has been made since their big trade a couple of Fridays ago of just how much raw speed they can put out with those two guys on a line, amongst the fastest skaters in the National Hockey League.
It was such a struggle for them before to get speed in their game, too. I'm being sarcastic.
I know. McKinnon can skate. There's a lot. In fact, they are the one team with speed that Vancouver handles okay. Like
they have consistently.
New Jersey and Winnipeg just make the Canucks look like such stuck in cement. But for whatever reason, they're able to handle Colorado's speed a little bit better.
Even before Tocchet showed up here, I mean, there was a game I remember a couple of years ago, right before American Thanksgiving, I was covering in Denver, and the Canucks just managed. There's something about the way, I guess, that McKinnon attack. It sounds strange to say, but the way McKinnon and Makar attack the outside, that some of the Canucks have always been able to manage them sort of away from the net in a way that they can't do with a guy like Connor McDavid. But yeah, they did a really nice job of. I mean, they'd say it all the time, protecting the guts of the ice. When the Canucks have been on this season, they have done a great job of doing that. And like you said, for whatever reason, against Colorado, they've been pretty consistently good at doing that.
Okay, big question on Demko. Because Talk had praised this Friday game against Dallas, said that wasn't on goaltending. Is Thatcher Demko back?
Well, the saves in that scramble, those were outstanding. And to me, more than anything, it's the way he looks like he may have solved his problem with shots to his left, which has been a problem for much of the year. That is still something I have my eye on. But yeah,
Is it the right or the left?
It was the left, yeah. So like there's certainly, I think it's still a comfort question there. But yeah, he that performance last night was absolutely vintage stuff, and coming on the back of a pretty good game. Yeah, a pretty good game on Friday. He has something to build with now, and I do think this is a guy that they're going to roll with, certainly going into the break here. Because they need him. They need him to be their number one. Kevin Lankinen's been a great story, and he's played great for them. But Kevin Lankinen is not their number one goalie. They need their number one goalie.
Yeah, and
then they're doing great.
And when Lankinen has played as a number one, that's when you've seen his level dip. Talk has mentioned that. There's been a couple of times this year when they've leaned on Lankinen for a few too many starts in succession.
Yeah, and
that is when they've seen Lankinen have some trouble. Okay, we have got to talk about Elias Pettersson,
yes.
EPD, or Junior, as Tyler Myers has now given up the ghost. We understand the young man may not love the nickname, but
apparently it was Adam Foote that was first trying to make it happen.
Okay.
So we'll see how it goes.
Well, that's his coach.
Yeah,
he's got even less say. I mean, maybe you can push back against
how much power do you have,
You're
Adam
certainly not pushing back on Adam Foote. He's a wrecking ball defenseman.
Yeah.
He asserts himself physically, sticking up for teammates like Connor Garland. He makes a good first pass. And alongside Marcus Pettersson, he has helped stabilize this Canucks defense. Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, in a very short sample, a very small sample. Here's head coach Rick Tocchet praising his young defenseman, Elias.
He's a bull out there. Strong. Good first pass, can shoot the puck. I mean, there's just a lot to work with. He's a prototypical D that you want on your team. And like as footy, and we were talking the other day with Gonch. We were in Dallas that game before the game. We were talking how there's lots to work with this guy. So, he's a guy that we're glad we have.
I like this tweet from Thomas Drance about Elias Pettersson. Mm-hmm. A lot of well-deserved praise for the Canucks rookie defender, but haven't seen anyone spotlight his work pinching down the wall. He's an absolute wrecking ball, and he's picking his spots perfectly. He's helped Vancouver generate multiple chances by extending offensive zone possession. Patrick, are we looking at a modern-day Nicholas Kronwall? For those who are too young to remember, Nicholas Kronwall, who played in the shadow of Nicholas Lidstrom for all those great Detroit Red Wings teams, might have been the meanest Swedish player. Well, Ulf Samuelsson's on that list too. But he specialized in coming down the wall, catching wingers with their head down as they were trying to manage a puck in their feet, and absolutely destroying them, blowing them up. Drance highlights that, and Thomas and Patrick, dare to dream here. To have the league leader in hits already on a Canucks record, Kiefer Sherwood, putting people into row C on the forecheck, and then having this kid, Elias Pettersson, blowing up wingers as they try and exit the zone.
Matthew.
This could be so much fun. Like, for everybody who has decried the lack of physicality in Vancouver Canucks hockey, and oftentimes with merit over the years that we've been doing this show, we might be on to something that's incredibly entertaining here with these two guys throwing the body.
I'm glad you're sitting down because you've already said a name that came up yesterday in this post-scrum chat that we had with Rick Tocchet.
Did Tocchet mention Cronwall?
No, he mentioned Ulf Samuelsson.
Did he really? Oh, my God.
It was put to him by Jay Janauer.
Well, of course, Rick would have played with Ulf in Pittsburgh
and
all
Rick
those
said,
years
listen,
ago.
he was one of the best, toughest defensemen in the league.
But Ulf was dirty.
Yes.
Like, he was yeah.
But yes, the hardness. He's like, no. There is a there's a hardness to Elias Pettersson's game. This is good.
Way to collect yourself. No, I know it's so.
This is literally the lead to my story.
It's
It's exhausting already. But there's a hardness to his game that says yes. I mean, the name Ulf Samuelsson was put to him, and he said, "Yeah, that's a pretty good comparison." Samuelsson was as tough as it came.
Yeah.
So there's obviously ways to go, but yes, the spirit is certainly there.
I'm not sure Samuelsson could play today.
Not the way he played.
Well, not just the way he played, but defensemen didn't move as well back then.
That's true.
Defensemen have to move better now.
That's true.
Don't get me wrong. Cronwall would cross the line from time to time. There were headshots there. There were late play, interference, and in fact, I can remember being in rooms and having wingers talk about, you guys need to write about how it's interference every fucking time he does it. It's interference. The puck is long gone. And he's blowing guys out. But the point being is, he created space. He had an intimidation factor to him. He was able to.
Well, he was going to hit you hard. Like,
that's it.
You were coming out of the corner feeling
exactly
warm and fuzzy.
But to Drance's point, creating more offensive zone time.
Yeah.
Because of picking your right spot to come down, pinch, and lay that hit. The intimidation, which created some time and space as well for him and his teammates. Yeah. He just allowed the other four guys on the ice with him to play in a more stress-free manner than if he's just backing off that blue line and they have to catch the rush as opposed to thwarting it right at the root.
Well, and that's been so much, I think, the frustration that Tocchet has felt this season because, he wants his players to play aggressive. He wants them to play on the edge. He wants them to push the other team into spots they don't want to be. And some of that means doing exactly what you just described. I mean, the counter version of that is the kind of wild shot attempt he had with the puck coming down. He tried to bat it out of the air. He didn't quite get it, but he still got his stick on it. And that just showed the confidence of the player.
I'm glad you brought that up. And I've used two examples here from recent Canuck history when talking about Elias Pettersson so far. One was Alex Edler coming up during the 07-08 season.
Mm-hmm.
And the other was Chris Tanev. That they arrived and they played with a confidence, a certainty, a calmness that just immediately projected to their teammates, coaches, and all of us watching, they belonged. They were NHL defensemen. And in Edler's case, it was, how could a guy playing, third or fourth, whatever division hockey he was playing in Sweden this soon? In Tanev's case, it's like, how could this college free agent out of RPI just step into the league and look that effortlessly like an NHL player? You're getting the same sort of vibe from Elias Pettersson. It's probably too soon. I still think there will be some step back games here, because how can there not be? I mean, nobody just sort of walks into the NHL and doesn't have a moment or two where it's like, okay, this is the best league in the world, and on that shift or in that game, you cost your team or it wasn't your best work. But there is just a vibe around him right now that makes it look like he belongs. And, this is manna from heaven for the Vancouver Canucks that he's dropped into their lap like this.
One of the challenges of playing in the AHL is how sort of scattered the game can be, because obviously you have a number of players who are NHL bound, a number of players who are there to be quite
well. There's an unpredictability to the AHL game, right? Like goaltenders will tell you, like when you play in the NHL, defensemen and wingers,
do what
centermen coming back behave in a certain way. In the AHL, it's not the case. So it's a little more.
And so that in a way, it sounds weird to say it's easier to adapt, but it's also harder to adapt because everything's faster.
Yeah, well, everybody is better, and time
you just have to do.
That's it.
And to this, 3 or 4 games, Pettersson has done that. I mean, teams will start getting a book on him, and they'll start applying pressure on him in ways that he has not expected and didn't know maybe you could do, and how he adjusts to that will be the next test for him. But he, through 4 games, has done everything that this team wants it to be, which includes being able to move the puck out of the zone quickly. That has been such a challenge for this team this year, and it's stark to me in hindsight, looking back at how badly they judged their defense corps situation.
Oh my God!
They're now fixing it. We knew they wanted another defenseman, but they're
fixing it in a big way.
Yeah.
One in house, and of course one by trade acquisition. Marcus Pettersson. Tocchet in the post game last night called him a leader. Noted that he was talking during one of those late timeouts, and he says typically the new guys stay very quiet in the early going, but there was Marcus Pettersson communicating with his teammates, sharing his input on what they needed to do, and Tocchet has said he is already added to the room. So when we talk joy, when we talk vibes, when we talk, Tocchet used the word reset the other day. It all seems to be happening right before our eyes.
You know who that reminds me of?
Who's that?
Ian Cole.
Yeah,
right?
very good.
Come in
very
and say,
comp.
I know what I do, and this is what I do, and this is why it works.
And not just you know what you do, you know what the team should do.
Yeah,
like there's enough hockey IQ there that you're able to communicate and impart wisdom.
Because
to your
I mean,
teammates.
there's the idea. I mean, I put this to him. Every player says, "Well, the systems are all the kind of same, but you have to adjust." And it's sort of like, yeah, you have to adjust. And I said, well, like what? And it is sort of coverage questions and what your teammates' inclinations are to do, and things like that. And the skill sets of the players around you, but in the end, the basics of what his skill sets bring to the table, which is that he is going to play aggressive, he is going to get the puck back, he is going to find a way, as I said, to make the puck move more quickly.
Yep. Well, and then there's this from Adam Kirsenblatt of the Hockey News. Rick Tocchet hockey as we have come to learn it, and I'd like your take on this because maybe they were a little bit caught in between this year. From the start of the season, trying to generate more rush chances, understanding that was a weakness of the game, and they had to do better. And then, especially after they lost Hughes and Pettersson for that brief period, where Tocchet realized we're just not generating enough shots on goal. We've got to put more pucks on net. But typically, Tocchet hockey, occupy time and space with big defensemen in the defensive zone. And then when you get it out, dump it, regain it. And once you've regained it, maintain it as a defensive tactic. Look for the high quality chance as opposed to just the shot on goal, which oftentimes can be transitioned back the other way. But what we learned from his first full season in Vancouver last year was they weren't going to give up a lot of high dangers. They weren't going to generate a lot of high dangers, but they were going to convert a good number of theirs. They had good enough goaltending that they were going to stop a good number of the ones against. We're going to keep the shots low on both sides of the ledger and play a more defensively oriented system with less puck possession. And as much as Chytil and O'Connor can help the puck possession side of things, and we're going to get into that in a moment, the fact of the matter is, between the two Petterssons added on defense, and frankly, Chytil and O'Connor, I think, as well, are going to play into this. listen to what Kirstenblatt found on the last two games, the Colorado and Detroit games. Overall, Vancouver, 26-8 high danger scoring chances advantage. They had 12 against the Avalanche. They had 14 on Sunday. They held Colorado to just 6 high danger chances, and Detroit had even less than that. It's a little extreme on the Canucks offensive side of the equation, but it is very much what we were looking at last year.
The remarkable thing for me, and I saw it right away last night, was Canucks gave it 4 shots against in the third period. Like, they just completely and locked it down against a team, obviously, that was leaning really hard on their top players, but who have elite top players. And they just gave them, I mean, we just mentioned this already, but they just gave them nothing. There was just nothing. The Canucks did a great job.
Well, that's after giving up 10 and 11 in the first 2 periods.
And that was in, a pretty wide open second period, especially. But that was
fun second.
It was fun second. But while integrating 3 new players, right? I mean, the last stretch of the game had Marcus Pettersson, had Filip, and Drew O'Connor all on the ice. They were 3 of the 5 guys for the last minute, whatever. Those were the guys locking it down. I mean, Tocchet said, these guys are here. We want to put, we want to show these guys matter. Obviously, there's a challenge when you are picking them over the current, the existing guys, but they got it done. That was a huge emotional moment for that team, for execution, for the win, for everything.
Chytil and O'Connor have almost single-handedly improved their rush chances and their controlled zone.
Well, they're
entries.
immediately the fastest skaters on the team.
Yes, which is truly remarkable, huh?
And for a team that talks so much about wanting, like I said, I don't quite understand what they were doing in the offseason, given they wanted to be better on the rush. I mean, being better on the rush isn't just about skating fast; it is about execution. But both those players,
it's about hockey IQ too, because you're making decisions in split seconds.
Yeah.
But Chytil and O'Connor, and by the way, that is a super smart empty netter from O'Connor. A lot of guys get that puck and shoot it from their side of center. Yeah. He was wise enough. Even if he misses the net there, that's a good play.
Yeah.
But that he hits the net is a great play.
Yeah.
And some of us had him as a plus 350 anytime goal scorer. So thank you, Drew O'Connor. More on that in Bet365. But Tocchet talked about they're improving the rush chances with their speed. They both have a willingness to go inside. They are not small men, either of them. Mm-hmm. And 2 of the 3 newcomers are out there late, protecting a lead. And here's the other thing to come full circle off my criticism of Elias and Brock together. He put Besser with these guys.
Yeah.
And that to me can work.
Yeah. I mean, it's always about what does each player want to do, right? Like, what are their instincts? Drew O'Connor's instinct is to go get the puck. We've already seen that. Filip wants to carry the puck in with speed. Brock Besser is going to set up. I mean, Brock Besser's ability to find the seam and be ready to score is one of his great talents.
That is his primary talent.
It is absolutely
Brock
fantastic.
Besser is like a lot of quote-unquote snipers in NHL history in that he has good hands, good shot, good IQ, and he makes up for a lack of pure physical tools by being a right place, right time guy.
And smart in how he uses his spaces.
Yeah. Right from the get-go.
Yeah.
You remember his first rookie season, and especially his full rookie season, we were talking about, man, like, this guy is not just a goal scorer. This is a really smart hockey player. And frankly, that's helped underpin him defensively as well, Patrick. Mm-hmm. Because with a guy who moves like that, isn't physical, go down the list, they don't typically make for good defensive forwards, but Brock is such a savvy hockey player that he's able to compete on that side as well. Anyways, here is Rick Tocchet. He is paraphrasing the old movie. He's got a need for speed.
Hang on, guys.
Maybe not Rick Tocchet. Mike will get Rick Tocchet here sorted.
Can Mike just read Rick's words?
We're gonna put Mike on errors and omissions. We almost never do that to him, but we're gonna put him on errors and omissions. Here's the other thing, and you and I were talking before the show. day after day, I come in and I start plotting this show, and I think to myself, thank God for Rick Tocchet.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, I've already referenced it. Or what?
Because he's just such an amazing communicator on the game of hockey, and his willingness to talk to this market. And I think he would do it anyways, but I also think he relishes the fact that this is a Canadian smart hockey market and he's talking to like-minded people. But his willingness to discuss areas of the game, especially the ones germane to his coaching and his system, like the year-end presser last year, when the question is barely out of whomever's mouth, and Rick is saying, I've already thought about it. You know, we've got to get better on the rush. That's on me. I'm going to spend the whole summer looking at this and blah, 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 and going on and on and on. Like, could you imagine a Peter Laviolette or like one of the grumps of the NHL, like wanting to take a fan base into his thinking, and especially into the areas of the game that he maybe doesn't coach as well or are not a big part of his system, and others pointing him out and saying, that's a problem with this coach. So, yeah, I mean, rush chances I don't think are ever going to be the biggest part of the way that Rick Tocchet coaches hockey, and yet he is so willing to engage in that part of the discussion around the club. We're going to go, Mike, yeah, here's Tocchet on the need for speed.
I don't want to overstate it, but I think Chytil and Drew O'Connor, the speed and their willingness to take the puck in the middle on a rush, like it's a little breath of fresh air when, you know, you see Chytil take that puck, he goes in the middle of the ice, and that's when things happen. So to just add in those two guys has helped our rush game. And you can see, like Yogi, we're smiling because that's the stuff we need, right? So those two guys for sure. And obviously both Pettersson's back there, good first pass, transporting the puck. So that's where you get the flow going. So, I have to give them a lot of credit. I know it's 2 games, and you know, it was a big win, and I think, you know, we got to stay even keel. But I do like the rush part of it, that they're willing to take the puck, even at the end. I know people might not say it, but O'Connor gets it standing still. Most guys just throw it out, might ice the puck, and he skates it and gets the empty net. That's a big play because he can skate.
Didn't want to overstate it, but not because this is grounds for fair criticism of Rick Tocchet, but because of the sample size. And I love the anecdote about him and Yogi looking at it like it's February fucking 4th, and finally, we're getting this integrated into what we do. Thanks, Coach. Appreciate the honesty. Yellow Dog Brewing Penticton is now open. Come for beers you know and love, and stay for the handcrafted cocktails and tasty menu items. It's open 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. Sunday to Wednesday, and 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Thursday, Saturday, for the love of dogs, community, and great beer. Yellow Dog Penticton. Okay, no Quinn Hughes at practice today.
Nope.
Has missed 2 straight games. Tocchet said he will see for San Jose and Toronto. It's a one-off game in San Jose against Macklin Celebrini. They're right back here for a Saturday hockey night or hockey day in Canada face-off against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Of course, Quinn Hughes' dad Jim was once a Toronto Maple Leafs employee, and the Hughes brothers spent some time growing up in metropolitan Toronto. You were telling me that there was video yesterday. He looked pretty good to me in what J-Pat shot. And, of course, he's been dealing with that hand. But talk to me. What do you think the injury is here, and what do you think the timeline is?
Well, I mean, my reaction when I saw him on Friday night was, it looks like maybe, I wonder if it's hamstring or groin or something like that. Certainly seemed like, if you were watching from down low, and it was the Global guys pointed this out, if you were watching from down low, you could see an exchange between him and one of the trainers after he kind of came out. I mean, he was getting around, but I think when he was turning to his left, if you were down low, you noticed him wincing a little bit. And there was an exchange before he came off, or just as he was coming off with the trainer, and basically, sort of some indication maybe towards midsection. So you start wondering if it's an abdominal issue. God forbid it's a sports hernia. That would be disastrous. But certainly, and I think the way Tocchet was talking about, he wouldn't really commit, and he didn't give anything away. But sort of trying to say, we can keep resting, and maybe it's the thing. I mean, if they're certainly hopeful that a little bit of time off the ice will help.
Do you think he plays Saturday?
My gut says no. I don't have any particular reason to think that, other than he's obviously, I don't think, going to play Thursday in San Jose. And if he doesn't play Saturday, and then he has, he doesn't go to Four Nations. I have a hard time.
Well, that's it.
Four Nations. The point you give him 2 weeks. He gets 3 weeks off. That's what I'm saying.
If he doesn't play Saturday, and look, coaches would not admit this, but you probably don't need Quinn Hughes to beat San Jose. I understand they're doing better this year, but that's not a very good hockey club. You probably do need him against Toronto, who are a much better hockey club. But if you sit him Saturday, do you now have grounds to say to the NHL and USA Hockey, look, he missed the last game before the break? Now, I don't know what Quinn wants here. I suspect he wants to play.
I think he wants to play.
But I don't know if this is a burning desire, a first opportunity to play best on best hockey or close to it. And,
I think for most of these guys, as weird as the timing of the tournament is, I think for most of these guys, the honor of being picked for that team really does matter to them. Whether once the games happen, obviously they're going to. We'll see how things go. I think the expectation is they'll go pretty hard. Will they go Stanley Cup playoff full out? I don't know. I have my doubts.
I think Canada USA will be there.
Yeah, but my impression certainly is that these are games that the players are intrigued by.
Yeah. I think February 15th, Canada USA will be Stanley Cup playoff intensity.
That would be great.
And I say that because I think you have enough guys on each side. First of all, the United States is very rarely an underdog in just about any sport the world over. Hockey has traditionally been one of them. To this day, the miracle on ice. You say that, everybody knows what you mean. South of the border. And for some people, they have not watched a hockey game since the Miracle on Ice in Lake Placid in 1980, south of the line. This is one, and I haven't referenced Bet365 here, but this is a tournament where I think you can very easily say the United States is the favorite. So I think you have the attention on both sides of the ledger.
You have a Canadian team.
Because the other thing about American players is, an old hockey writer once said this to me. He said, the thing about American hockey players is, unless they grew up in small-town Minnesota, they're usually pretty bitter because they're not big man on campus despite their exploits. The quarterback is, or the point guard is. So they thrive in an environment, typically. They, have the bit between their teeth to get up and play in an environment where hockey is everything. And, of course, that's what Canada brings, right? Whereas this is identity defining for us, right? We're the best hockey playing nation on earth. It's what we do.
Yeah.
It's on the sign when you enter the country, effectively, metaphorically. So I think Canada USA will have some bite.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about the other ones. It's hard to work up hate for Swedes and Finns.
I think the Swedes and Finns will go hard at each other.
Fair. But yeah.
I suppose.
Now, Canada may get Finland and Sweden's best game too. We'll see. But that Canada USA one, I think, is going to be. I think that one's going to be a beauty. Soucy, Carson Soucy, Pierre LeBrun. While Soucy is available for trade, senses he wants to try and make it work still with Vancouver. Still his camp, and the Canucks have talked about working together on a potential trade if that's the end result before March 7th. You would be trading Carson Soucy at low ebb here, Peach. Does that make sense to you? Is there such a robust market for defensemen out there that you think you can just make a great value trade here? Can he fetch a similar profile right side D, which gets you ahead? Because robbing from your depth on defense, especially with a big-bodied guy who did pretty well in the playoffs last year,
right,
when you don't have certainty on EPD, you have a lot of potential promise. Love the early returns. I'm just having trouble putting all this together and getting to the wisdom of it all.
They in adding MP3, Marcus Pettersson, which may be one of the nicknames, although of course his number's wrong. He's MP29, which doesn't have. I mean, it's
Is that
very
better that I see EP116 on Twitter?
well. EP116 is derogatory.
It is.
MP3 is a very millennial choice. I don't know. You're Gen X. Does that ring to you the same way it does to someone my age?
What? Say it again.
MP3. Just making that. So is that a silly enough in joke for you, or are you kind of like, oh?
I don't like that it's 3 syllables.
Yeah. Anyway,
most hockey nicknames are 2 syllables or one.
Millsy. Speaking of Millsy, they didn't. I don't think in this trade, at least it doesn't feel like it. They robbed Peter to pay Paul, right? But what you're describing, if they trade Soucy, that is robbing Peter to pay Paul. At least that feels like it. When I see what Pierre reported and has been suggested in other places, to me that is simply answering our friend Jason Botchford's question: will he waive? And in this particular case, I think we now have the answer. Is that yeah, I would consider it because he does have control over his situation. That said, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, this is an organization. I mean, every team knows how hard it is to find defensemen that can play for you in the playoffs. And that is a long-standing thing for Jim Rutherford. You look at his Stanley Cup runs in Pittsburgh. I mean, he traded for defensemen who barely played. Yeah. In the playoffs for him, simply because he knew we need to have enough guys or more than enough guys.
Right. So what makes sense to me to the question, will he waive, if he can be packaged?
Yeah.
If it's packaging to value up.
Well, if you're hunting for, I mean, it is clear they have a bunch of cap space. It's hard to think that they will not try to fill that with a very, very good player.
That has been the modus operandi of this management group and this ownership group. I do think you need to win some games between now and then to get there.
Yeah.
It makes no sense to spend the owner's money on a final 20 games if you're missing the playoffs.
Right.
Now, you should be in good standing. Was it 8 or 9 games left before the deadline, something like that? You should be in good standing. Frankly, if you're 500 in the remaining games until the deadline, you're right there.
Yeah.
And so it's going to happen. But, first make sure you don't go on a 5-game losing streak, because that could affect the price of everything.
Yeah.
Congratulations to the 2025 class of the BC Hockey Hall of Fame, and I'm sure you'll have a marvelous weekend in Penticton with Jim Hewson at the controls. From Smithers, British Columbia, former Canucks defenseman Dan Hamhuis. Absolutely delighted by Dan, one of my favorite people who has come through Canucks sports and entertainment in the 17 years I've been around the club. Born in Trail, raised in Castlegar, 3 times for Canada at the World Junior. Sean Horkoff, congratulations to him as well. I was delighted to see Mike Penny there in the builder category. Mike, of course, a long time NHL executive and scout based here in Vancouver.
Very important scout for
2 franchises.
Yeah, but if you want to understand that 90s Canucks team,
Mike is
massively, not just as the storyteller, but as the guy who was because there were only 4 scouts. Mike was the head scout.
Right.
It
was a really small room.
There's a photo I saw I think it was yesterday, talking about, it might have been actually about the announcement, but it's the Canucks staff essentially at the draft, and I guess whatever, it's a Darcy Rhoda as PR exec era photo, so it's like 1989, something like that. And you look at it and you're like, there's Pat Quinn and there's Brian Burke. And then you sit and go, wait, that literally, and there's Ron DeLorme with his mustache. And that's literally the 4 scouts sitting at the table. That's it.
And Mike was there for
Kenny Slater and Jack McCartan, the four scouts. And they were the guys that found Gino Ojic and found Pavel Bure and Trevor Linden.
You didn't find Trevor Linden.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. But they were the guys doing
they had
the work.
The hand in drafting all of those
guys. And that
was
actually, for a team that struggled mostly to draft, and obviously there were some big misses, but there were a lot of hits in that era.
It's the nature of the beast, the draft. You're going to have misses. The other thing I'll say, when I covered Pat Quinn's Toronto Maple Leafs, if you happened to see Mike Penny at the ACC, you knew something serious was happening because, when the big Irishman called in Mike personally for the face-to-face, they were probably considering something significant. Larry Kwong in the Pioneer Player Builder category, Ted Hargraves as a builder, the 87 Centennial Cup champion Richmond Sockeyes. And it still remains one of my favorite nicknames in all of hockey. The 78 Allen Cup champion Kimberley Dynamiters.
Absolute best.
It is just glorious. Go look up the old logos of the Kimberley Dynamiters. Sorry, Mike, I should have had that for a visual. I'll put myself on E's and O's as well. Congratulations to them all.
That whole league, I don't remember what that league was called, but there was a senior loop there that was there for years. The Dynamiters. The
Dynamiters and the Buckaroos.
Kamloops Buckaroos. The
Summerland.
Penticton V's. Summerland did not have a team because my dad grew up in Summerland. They had to go down and watch the V's.
What, did Summerland not have the...
Summerland was tiny. Matt, people do not understand how small Summerland was in the 60s. It was my dad and his buddies, and that was it.
I thought...
No, Summerland...
No, Summerland had the Buckaroos at one point, did they not?
Well...
I thought Tomlinson...
No. I mean, it might have been at one point. Yeah,
83 to 88, the BCHL Summerland Buckaroos.
But I'm just telling you, in the old days,
I think DT might have played for him.
Yeah, the senior when it was a senior loop, there were some classic names there. So.
Oh, there were some amazing names. Go back to the 70s and 80s in BC minor hockey, junior hockey. There are some incredible names. And yes, Dave Tomlinson was a Summerland Buckaroo.
There you go.
Time now for the menu, brought to you by Greta Bar. Speaking of that Canada-USA game on February 15th, we will be there at Greta, 50 West Cordova, for a big watch party, and we're inviting you to come along and join. You get your tickets at nationgear.ca. They're $10. If you want the VIP package, it's $40. That includes your ticket, a burger, a beverage, and a game card to play at the amazing arcade they have at Greta. We'll be raising some money for our Social Run Club YVR. This is all presented by Fountain Tire. We got a raffle, exclusive prizes. Doors at 4, puck drop at 5. Grab your tickets, nationgear.ca, February 15th at Greta. We got Frank Corrado coming up, former Vancouver Canuck. He is the chairman of the Victor Mancini Fan Club. He'll tell you about that. Laurence Gilman dives into this trade with all the trades, plural, with all his experience in NHL front offices. That's coming up on the show. But first, the Bet365 bets of the day. And this segment proudly presented by Bet365. Took to the final 10 seconds, but I got my Drew O'Connor anytime goal. Thank you. And thank you to everybody who noted on the timeline last night. Appreciate that. Jalen Hurts. He is one of the NFL's top passers when thrown to the flats, those screens, those throws behind the line of scrimmage. The short passing game is his sweet spot. If you're Philly on Sunday, I think you need to maximize Saquon Barkley's touches. And that means throwing him the ball as much as it does handing it off to him. Barkley over 2.5 catches, paying at plus 145. What you got?
Well, I'm going to tell you about a young kid who just wanted to know what was going on in the world of soccer. When you were in the early 90s, there was only one show, Matthew. It was called Soccer Saturday.
Graham Leggett on TSN.
Hosted by Graham Leggett. And that team, the team in the England to be seen, was one Manchester United. So, yes, I am a Manchester United fan. Yes, this season, absolute misery. Mm-hmm. But there has been a consistent bright light in the midst of all the chaos of recent seasons. His name is Bruno Fernandes. So, Man United facing Leicester this weekend, FA Cup 4th round. Anytime goal, Bruno Fernandes paying $2.75.
Tell me, if you're a Manchester United fan, how are your Yankees and Cowboys doing?
Oh, yeah. There you go.
Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets. So, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION when opening that account. Frank Corrado coming up next. Harrison Price from the historic Wall Center, and Ben Moss, a history of more than 100 years right here in Canada. Proudly Canadian-owned, operated. Check out their large selection of Canadian mine diamonds, lab-grown diamonds. They got diamonds with payment plans to suit your needs. 5 locations in British Columbia, Abbotsford, Victoria, Chilliwack, Coquitlam Center, Willowbrook, and Langley. For more info, check out benmoss.com. Ben Moss, shine bright. And Frank Corrado, former Vancouver Canuck and TSN hockey analyst, got this market jumping on Friday because the JT Miller trade comes down. Everyone's rushing to Filip Chytil's hockey DB page, and Frankie tweets out, "Don't sleep on Victor Mancini."
It's not just an Italian thing, Matt.
I was saying, is this Italian defenseman? Like, this is
Not
some
just
club
an
you guys are
Italian
in?
thing. No, it's not.
So what is it then? What is it?
First of all, I'd like to thank Darren Dreger for the scouting report that he gave you guys. Way to temper expectations. Now,
he cited you. In fairness, there was a citation there.
No,
He's
I
like,
know.
Frank Corrado.
I know.
He did not try and take credit.
He said, no. He said, this is coming from Frank, and then laid it all out, which is here's my thing. I got out of hockey. I got right into media. I never did like pro scouting, amateur scouting, player development, which is something that I probably thought I would coming out of hockey. So I've heard the term, like, the scouts, they bang the table over certain guys. They're like, this is my guy, and I believe in this guy. I have never done that ever in real life, but I guess you can say this is like my media version of banging the table because I think this guy is a good player. I called a Rangers game earlier in the season against the Habs, and he was playing. Like, pretty unknown guy, you know, when you're just calling games and that team rolls into town. And I'm watching, I'm like, holy smokes. Like, where'd this guy come from? Like, you know, he's big, he moves. And actually, previous to that, I had watched the Rangers-Capitals game because, like, that's the lead-up game. I always watch the lead-up game, and I'm like, even Ray is mentioning this guy is a good player, like he's caught his eye. So, you know, I think I right away the size jumps off the table, the skating ability, and then I'm watching, I'm like, he can actually carry the puck. Like, he wants to transport it himself. So I think there's a lot of things to like about that guy. And if his progress continues, because he's a young defenseman, he's still trying to establish himself, like, we know that can go awry. Like, we've seen it, case in point. But, you know, like, if he continues to move in the right direction, they have something. I believe, like, if I was sitting around a table, I would be banging the table saying, I believe they have something with this guy.
So you like the Miller trade then?
I mean, given the circumstances, I think it's fine. What more were you going to get? You had a limited, you know, group of teams or team to negotiate with. Like, everyone knows you have to make a trade. So you get back Filip Chytil, who, if he can stay healthy, is, pretty dynamic and pretty silky little centerman. Well, not little, but, like, pretty dynamic guy. He's got to stay healthy. That's a big if. You get a defenseman that could potentially be an NHL second to maybe third pair, in between type guy for, I don't know, 10 years. Could he be that? Like, and then you turn the pick into Marcus Pettersson. Hopefully you re-sign him, I would imagine. Given the circumstances, I don't have an issue with the return on that trade. How much better were you expecting to do?
Okay, give me your player eval. Give me your scouting report on Chytil.
I think he's quite talented. He skates well. He's got some creativity to his game, and I think the Canucks are in a place where they can use that. Like, there hasn't been a lot of creativity offensively this year, and we're already kind of seeing it the way. He comes from a different team with a different philosophy, different mentality, and you plug that into Vancouver and you say, that looks a little bit different, because New York has always been this team that, like, they'll live and die by the rush. Like, they'll kind of open it up. They'll get the track meet going, and for better or for worse, that's just kind of how they've done things, and they've masked it with good goaltending for a lot of that duration. But, he has a different spice, a different element to his game. I think he skates well. I think there's a playmaking ability, and I think there's there's just a good toolbox as far as what a crafty centerman can be. So I like it. The concussion history is concerning. Like, you can't get around it.
One of the things that Rick Tocchet's talked a lot about is wanting to have more rush opportunities, essentially. How much of the struggles this year of the team was about roster construction, and how much of it is that the system they were already kind of playing?
Well, I think some of it has to do with the fact that when Hughes is not on the ice, the puck just doesn't get to guys to where they can attack off the rush. Like, that's part of it. I don't necessarily
except for last night with Hronek. I mean, he teased 2 rush goals. I mean, that was a monster game from Filip.
It was
when they needed it most because Quinn's not playing.
And that's the reason why I thought about it. You mentioned Marcus Pettersson already. I mean, we can already see, I feel like, the influence he's having. Elias Pettersson obviously early returns, but it feels like there's a shift in the way these defensemen play.
Yeah, well, because they're guys that can actually move the puck with a little more of a purpose, and it doesn't get bogged down, right? Like, right. I think that's the thing that when I watch Vancouver, I'm like, it moves so slow, and it doesn't move at the right cadence and the right pace, and you're not going to get anything off the rush that way because you're not beating anyone. Like, you always have to go through 4 or 5 guys, and it's just you're not creating odd man chances. So having these guys now will give them a better opportunity to be better off the rush. I don't think it completely does a 180. Last night is a nice thing, but going back to your question about, what is it? Is it the system? Is it the personnel? Ultimately, like, you can have a system in place, but if you don't have the personnel that can execute it, we don't even really know what the system exactly is. So maybe now you bring in Pettersson, you bring in Chytil, and maybe with Hronek and when Hughes comes back, we get to see, like, okay, we'll have the answer to that, because with those guys, there should be more of an ability to get it into the hands of the guys that can make the plays off the rush and attack more. But I would say largely for this season, you're looking at it saying it could be the system, but we just don't know because it doesn't get there enough.
Give me your 2 cents on Marcus Pettersson.
So Pittsburgh has been terrible defensively. This year, I think last year their underlying numbers were okay. They just gave up a lot of goals and their power play was horrible. But the one constant was that Marcus Pettersson, if you put him with Carlson or if you put him with Letang, like, he was the guy who could kind of put out the fires and be the stabilizer, which is a nice attribute to have. He's obviously, like, he's got the Tocchet kind of Jimmy Rutherford, long, rangy body type that they really like. But he's that guy that, obviously is paid accordingly, but can actually play with the puck and is not the bottom of the barrel types that, you're just hoping can give you a little bit more than maybe they're supposed to moving the puck, which is kind of what we see with Vancouver a little bit right now, whether it was Desharnais or Forbert this year. It's like, yeah, he's built similar to those guys, but he can play. And he's been part of Pittsburgh's teams when they've had better players around. So I'm pretty comfortable with him. And the fact that he's played with, very skilled defensemen, and has been able to be the stabilizing force for those guys. I think that's a nice attribute to have. And he just brings another element of, like, a legitimate top 4 NHL guy that can do a lot for your group and things that aren't necessarily easy to do.
AFP Analytics, and for those who don't know, TSN's Frank typically in the offseason does some work on free agency and what guys are worth. AFP Analytics is one of the sites that we all look at when projecting contracts. They got him as a 5-year, $5.8 million guy to re-sign. Would you do that deal? Would you be comfortable with that deal?
He's what? He's 30, or is he a little older right now? He's early 30s, I think.
No, I think he's 28.
Yeah, 28.
Oh, he's 28. Oh, I do that.
He'll be
deal
29 in May. He'll be 29 in May.
I'll do that deal all day long because you know what? Someone else is going to do it, and then you're looking to find, like, a a Dollarama version of him. You know, like that's where your options go afterwards. I just think there's enough of a track record with this guy playing on teams that had struggled defensively, but him being the outlier that is good defensively, that would lead you to believe that, you know, he's a guy you would want in the fold. And that's what a defenseman is going to make. Like Matt Roy, in this new cap, like this old cap world, call it, because the cap's going up a ton. He signed for 5.8 with Washington, right? So, like, if you're going to get him under $6 million, Jake McCabe in Toronto signed an extension for 4.5. Like, he would get way more on the open market, right? So, like, I think if you're comparing it to guys that are, you know, kind of two-way, solid defensively, play a lot of minutes, I'd have no issue giving him that kind of term and that kind of money. And if you don't, someone else is going to, and you're trying to solve that problem elsewhere.
What can you tell us about Drew O'Connor?
I think I think Pittsburgh always thought there was more under the hood there, and it never really came to fruition. Speedy guy, straight line, you know, up and down, and that's fine. Like, it might not be the fanciest, but you know, he's not your marquee guy out of that whole thing. But what it is another depth NHL body that can serve a purpose. And to me, that purpose is, you know, speed, straight lines, get it to the net, you know, try and get to the middle of the ice when you can. It's not overly fancy. And if you can, you know, unlock a little bit offensively, I think that's great, because Pittsburgh was trying to do that for a while, and I don't think it ever took that next step there. And if it happens in Vancouver, that's great. It's found money.
Any chance he could play in the middle?
I don't know. I don't recall ever seeing him play in the middle.
He hasn't much, but guys in Pittsburgh were wondering, like, whether he could ever play the middle. But if you think it's a non-starter, it's...
I don't know if it's a non-starter. I guess when you can skate as well as he can, like, I'm sure anything is possible. Like that gives you an avenue to do it. I always thought of him as just a straight line winger. That's my recollection of watching him play.
And that's, I mean, many ways that's what the Canucks kind of need, is they need that guy that can get up there. And I mean, like you said, maybe you would like to see him have a little more with his hands or whatever. But when it comes to being a disruptive player, speed can do a lot, can't it?
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, you talk about speed and maybe, you know, the hands, the finish. There was a good article written this year about Cirelli in Tampa, and that he felt like he had to slow things down a little bit around the net because it was going to help him finish a little bit more. And I think Kucherov had something to do with that as well, just like kind of pointing him in that direction. And so, you know, it's one thing to play with speed, it's one thing to play with pace, but you almost have to bring it down to like 80% when you're around the scoring areas, because sometimes your brain just doesn't think as fast as your hands or your feet might. And so, you know, that was kind of leading to Cirelli scoring more this season in Tampa Bay. And I wonder if that could be the same thing for O'Connor. Very different, you know, players and makeups and role on the team for sure. You know, but that's something that pretty much anyone who's a forward can implement. Like if you feel like you're skating past the area that, you know, you need to get to at the wrong time, bring it down to 80% and see if you can force your mind to do that.
Let's move on to Elias Pettersson, because needless to say, all the onus is now on, well, not all the onus, needless to say, minus JT Miller, he needs to be the player we've seen in the past, the player from the first half of last season. We are asking on our Surrey Mitsubishi poll question here, Frank, do you believe Elias Pettersson will get his game back? Yes, no, or not in Vancouver? Where do you stand on Elias? Where do you stand on Elias getting it back here, or is just too much happened here that he might need to be a change of scenery guy? You tell me.
Ooh, it's not no. It's definitely not no. It's somewhere. It's either yes or not here. Like I believe he's too talented to just never find it again. And yes, there's been a lot of noise here. A lot of stuff has happened. But I would probably lean more towards he can do it. and will do it. It's just, it's when it falls off like that, I think there's parts of you that probably look at it and say, well, why? Like, why does it just fall off like that? Is it injury stuff? Is it mental stuff? Like, is there stuff in your personal life? Like, it's hard to explain a player playing at such an elite level for like a decent amount of time. Like, it's not just a flash in the pan. It wasn't just a hot couple weeks. And we've seen it from him a lot throughout his career. But, when that kind of stuff happens, you're like, it's justified to say, does it have to be somewhere else? I think you will always take the talent and you will always bet on the talent, like the cream always does rise to the crop. But it is, it's okay to ask the question, like, maybe it's just not going to be here for whatever reason. I think I'm still, like, I would need to see the rest of the season play out before I would say it's got to be somewhere else. I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt and say, like, you can do it in Vancouver.
Have you seen anything in how teams are defending him that might be something he has to sort out?
Well, I don't think he has any kind of like getaway speed, right? Like that's one of the things that holds him back is that, defensemen can all skate for the most part. And if you play them tight, which guys want to do, there's no beware of playing him too tight because he can burn you. Like the best example of that is McDavid. You want to play up in McDavid's face? No problem. He is going to burn you at some point in the game. I don't feel confident that Pettersson can do that. And I think in the past he has been able to, although he's not like the most electric skater. He has been able to turn the burners on, and I don't see that. So I think, when teams are defending Pettersson, they're quite confident telling their players, be in his grill, be up in his face, tight gap, like you will be able to recover because he doesn't have that, that sixth gear to kind of separate and get away from you.
Lastly here, buddy, want to lay on your expertise of being in NHL rooms. We were worried or are worried about a dressing room divide, right? Like JT Miller would have had his friends. JT Miller would have had people in that room looking around going, why did we trade this? Our number one center, our matchup center. And yet Chytil has come and Pettersson have come in here with just so much joy and enthusiasm. And that has risen to the fore here in the two games that we've seen since. And one wasn't even a win, right? It was an overtime loss. Are they out of the woods yet? And can the vibes and the enthusiasm of new players help offset what could have been a very touchy, sensitive, or even a soul-crushing moment for that Canucks room?
I think so. I think your point is valid about, there would have been people on both sides of the aisle there. But ultimately, like, I think Jim Rutherford's comments in the Globe and Mail were very revealing that, like, the black cloud, the sun would kind of poke through, basically, but it was always there. And now you've removed it. And so that was the thing you had to do. And for better or worse, guys will move on. And it's going to be a different tone in the room. There's going to be a different feel. I would imagine like guys would probably be walking around the room a little lighter. Like JT Miller, he runs hot, like, yes, holding guys accountable, all that kind of stuff. That also wears on you. It wears on the people who, would be in those confrontations. It wears on the people that would wonder, am I next? And even just watching it happen as a third party, So, you don't have that. That's fine. They'll still have to hold themselves accountable in their own way. But, not having that, like, let's call a spade. Like, guys will be walking around a little free and easier just knowing that, there's not that potential of, whatever outburst or confrontation that maybe probably some guys didn't like.
Yeah. Awesome stuff, Frank. Thank you for this. Much appreciated. We'll catch up next week.
Okay, fellas. Have a good one.
If you are struggling with things like managing stress, anxiety, relationships, or divorce, reach out to the counselors at Advanced Counseling. Book your free initial consultation today at advancedcounseling.ca.
Harrison Price from the Historic Wall Center. This segment brought to you by Pacific Toyota Dealers. The 2024 Toyota BZ4X, the ideal Vancouver car. Ultimate commuting vehicle, full access to the HOV lane, 100% electric. Plug it in at home overnight and never see a gas station. Incredibly spacious. It's got legroom for days, heated seats in the back. It's packed with all the things you want in SUV, cargo capacity, fits family, friends, pets, sports gear. Can handle all the terrain here, city to the slopes. Got a digital key. You can run it from your phone. And when you choose the BZ4X, you can get up to $6,500 in rebates and incentives. And now you can finance a 2025 BZ4X from 3.29% APR for 36 months. Take a test drive. Learn how easy an electric vehicle is. If you've got questions, visit your nearest Pacific Toyota dealership today or visit shoptoyota.ca. As we welcome in the former assistant general manager of the Vancouver Canucks, NHL executive with the Canucks, Leafs, Coyotes, and Jets, Mr. Laurence Gilman. How are you? Say hi to Patrick.
Patrick, how are you? You're a sight for sore eyes, I must say.
It's great to see you, not just on Instagram.
Mm-hmm. Were you covering the team when he was working?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, but
you met later in life.
Yes.
Yeah.
He was doing a lot of yoga.
That's right.
It's true.
That is true.
When we used to bring him in for Wednesdays with, that's when Gilman went through his transformation. Like suddenly he was the fittest guy in the building. We haven't talked to you since the big activity on Friday, Laurence. So let's go at this one at a time. First things first, what did you make of the JT Miller trade?
Well, let me answer that in a different fashion, because although you did not give me a heads up on what we would talk about today, I kind of had a hunch that we would discuss Friday's events. And I think, in fairness to the Canucks and your listeners, I think you need to analyze the totality of the circumstances and look at the asset allocation that occurred in total. And, in thinking about it over the weekend, what occurred to me was there are two kinds of trades in the modern NHL. There are hockey deals, and then there are money deals. And each type of deal has its own time and place, depending upon where your team is at in its cycle. And in this tandem of deals, I really feel that Rutherford and Alvin were able to accomplish both to the betterment of their hockey team. Leaving aside the fact that, taking JT Miller out of the room and out of the team has had a decompressing effect, which has been palpable. You could see it in the way the team has played in the last 3 games. Let's analyze the hockey side of the deal first. In the two deals, the Canucks moved out JT Miller, who's a 31-year-old 1 or 1A centerman. They moved out Danton Heinen, who's a 29-year-old bottom 6 soft forward. And they moved out Vincent Desharnais, who's a bottom pairing, limited skill defenseman, something that they have numerous commodities of. And they brought back Filip Chytil, who's a 25-year-old 2-3 center. And the Canucks are banking on the fact that he's closer to a 2, because by virtue of the fact that he played behind Trocheck and Zibanejad for most of his time in New York. You brought back Marcus Pettersson, who's a 28-year-old, call him a top 4 pairing defenseman, who has been utilized with high-risk, high-reward defensive partners like Erik Karlsson and Chris Letang. That says to me that this is a guy who's incredibly dependable, who coaches trust. A player like a Chris Tanev, or to date myself, a Teppo Numminen, who's just a Swiss Army knife defenseman. I mean, every competitive Stanley Cup competing team needs that. You also brought back Drew O'Connor, who's a bottom 6 forward who has size and grit and plays with, a certain amount of tenacity. And then you brought back the Mancini kid, who, hopefully it hasn't been the kiss of death for this kid that everybody has said he's going to be a top pairing defenseman. But, the upside for him is pretty good. And yes, the Canucks gave up the best player in the deal, but they addressed needs that they had and changed the chemistry of their team. And I was one who has more or less shouted from the rooftops that they need to upgrade their defense. And they did that in this deal. And I quite frankly, from the hockey side, I like it. Now let's turn the ledger and go to the money side of the deal. In the first transaction, moving out JT Miller and Eric Brandstrom, and I must give credit to Cody Sievertson of Canucks Army, because while I had thought this through, I read today he did the math. So I haven't double checked his math, but I'm pretty certain he's right. In the New York transaction, moving out JT Miller and Brandstrom, they moved out $43 million worth of obligation and took back 12 in Chytil and Mancini. Now, JT Miller is a great player. He's 31 years old. He's owed $42 million or whatever it is on that contract, which expires, I believe, in 2030, at which point he'll be 37 years old. A deal like that doesn't age well. You know, unfortunately for teams, what happens in the National Hockey League is that players earn the most money at the end of their career when their skills are declining. And I don't think that deal is going to be very good in the last year or two. I could be wrong, but a player who burns as hot as JT Miller tends to have more of a cataclysmic decline in their productivity. And you moved out Brandstrom, who was a piece they didn't need. In the other deal, you know, they moved out two other players that they had no use for, in Desharnais and Hyman, who had $6 million worth of obligation, and they swapped that back for $2 million in the form of Pettersson and O'Connor. And yes, they are going to try and sign both those players, I believe. So there will be an obligation, but that's a lot of flexibility. I mean, that's a good money deal for them as well. So when the dust settles on this, I mean, I'm certain they have more moves to make. I think, you know, by all accounts, they probably want to find another center iceman somewhere. And I hear Soucy's name is being bandied about. But when the dust settles on that deal, I think they made themselves a better hockey club, both in their dressing room and on the ice.
In adding up that equation, to me, that cap space is massive, isn't it? I mean,
can you tell he's a former capologist? I know he hates the term, but can you tell?
But it's massive, isn't it? I mean, it's not just that they've removed the player that's contract going to age badly, but they've actually given themselves to do it again. They can find something better with that cap space.
It only took 20 years for general managers, or 20 years or so, for general managers to understand the value of cap space. And the teams, you know, one needs to merely look at the announcement the National Hockey League made last week in terms of the rise of the cap. Like, the top end teams, the high revenue teams in the National Hockey League are licking their chops because it provides them so much more opportunity and flexibility to address the needs of their hockey club and go out and get players that are going to make them better. Like, cap space is king, like in the National Hockey League. I mean, obviously you have to have good players to win, and you need to build the team properly. And draft and develop well and do all of that. But yes, Patrick, you hit the nail on the head. Like, moving out $43 million worth of obligation is a pretty good thing for the Canucks at the end of the day.
You would have seen Chytil 2-3 times a year when you were there with the Leafs. You mentioned 2-3C, and they're hoping he can become a 2C. Give me the player evaluation there. What do you think of Filip Chytil?
Well, I've always liked Filip Chytil. I from the time he was drafted, I mean, he plays with speed, he plays with skill, he's got a good shot. You know, the only issue that's really set him back are the injuries that he's had, and again, the fact that he's played on a really good team. You know, it's tough to be a young. That's a double-edged sword when you're a young player coming into a good team, because on the one hand you play behind good players, but on the other hand you get to play with good players. I think he's a guy who has more to give, for sure. And I think he fits what the Canucks are doing. And you know, if this deal opens up time, space, mental capacity for Elias Pettersson, the forward, you know, he could slot in as a very effective second-line center for them, and that would be a really good 1-2 punch.
How hard is it to project, though? I mean, we always see the sort of question, if this guy only had, you know, more minutes, you could just blow him up and you become this incredible player. That's the hardest thing, though, isn't it?
Well, listen, it's not an exact science, ever. You know, one needs to look back at what the player was in his junior career, where Filip, you know, Chytil was a number one center coming up and growing up, which is why he was picked in the first round. But, you know, you don't know what the player development was like in his prior organization. You don't know how he was impacted by his place in the cosmos, so to speak. So it's always a roll of the dice when you bring a young player in. And there are instances where, you know, Marcus Naslund was a struggling young player in Pittsburgh who came to Vancouver and flourished. Cam Neely was a young player who had his warts in Vancouver and went to Boston and flourished. So, you can win big on these deals, but there is a gamble with it for sure.
Are they done? Should they be done here, Laurence? Right on the playoff precipice? Do you think they need to make additions to cement their place as a playoff team?
Well, I would be in wait and see mode and watch and see how the team as a whole does, how Elias Pettersson does. I'll touch on Soucy for a moment. This guy's paying the price and is the whipping boy in the market, which I think is somewhat nonsensical. He was a pretty darn good and effective defenseman for the Canucks last year, particularly in the playoffs. And a guy doesn't go from being a good player to a bad player, overnight. And I think what happens is when the construction of your team, and let's use the defense corps as an example, when it is flawed, and it has been flawed, not enough, you had two top end guys in Quinn Hughes and Roenick who both had injury issues, and Myers, and the drop off after that has been significant. And what happens when that occurs, and as I said, they had a whole host of, or a bunch of bottom six defensemen, that puts extra pressure on a player like Soucy, who should slot in as a 4th/5th guy on a decent team. But having that much pressure and playing greater minutes means mistakes happen. And I'm willing to bet that as time goes on, his play is going to improve, and maybe they don't need to go out and do something else. But time will tell.
Yeah. Well, help me out on the market for Soucy then, Laurence. He's got a full no trade this year. It becomes a 12-team no trade list in July. He's making $3.25. He's got one more year left. He's got size that you can't teach, and was pretty effective in the playoffs last year as a stopper against some terrific forwards. What do you think he's worth out there on the trade market?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it depends on what your needs are. I definitely believe, again, let's go back to the cap rising as much as it is. The teams are always looking for defensemen, particularly as the playoffs approach. And having him under contract for one more year is not that arduous. And they would be able to move him, to a number of teams. What they get for him depends what they want. I mean, if they would just want to, as Patrick said, clear up the cap space, they can, get a decent draft pick for him, or they can get a prospect who's not playing in the league, or they can package him with something else and maybe get the center iceman that they think that they need. Again, what I would do is I would sit back and assess what we have, what the team has for the time being, and then make a decision with respect to Soucy or anybody else for that matter.
Given Jim Rutherford's track record, I the moment I heard that, maybe they'll trade him, I kind of went, well, hold on. This is a guy that actually can play in the NHL, and Jim Rutherford has always stockpiled defensemen. I mean, that's been a lesson over the course of his entire career. So the idea of them moving on, to me, I guess I get why they could be frustrated with how he's played, but the potential seems to me it's still there. There's not a notion that suddenly this guy's turned into a useless part.
The history is littered with defensemen. We talked about players, forwards that have struggled and moved on. Larry Murphy was a player that they basically ran out of Toronto at one point, right, and then went on and became a linchpin to Detroit's Stanley Cup winning teams. Like, this guy's a decent defenseman. He's just been overpressured because of the flawed construction in the defense, and has had to play above his punching weight. It's the same every year. Everyone starts the year, you have too many defensemen, the calendar turns, and you don't have enough. You can get rid of a player like Carson Soucy and regret it 2 games later.
Okay, Laurence, we have got to talk about Elias Pettersson, and just for your edification, because I know this isn't league-wide yet. Elias the forward, Elias the defenseman. That's what we're going with here.
Okay.
To distinguish them.
Thanks for clarifying that for me.
Well, yeah, because, and honest to goodness, like, poor Elias Pettersson, because they're now calling him Junior, which I'm not sure he loves, and I'm not necessarily sure he would pronounce his name Elias if there wasn't already. He doesn't
have a say in what they call him.
No, exactly. No. He is low man on the totem pole here, although some really nice returns here this week. But Elias Pettersson, the forward, So it has been a year now, a calendar year, where he has struggled through the second part last year, through the playoffs, and through the first 50-some games this year. How much patience can an organization have for a player with this kind of talent in this kind of slump? You mentioned Marcus Pettersson. People bring up the Sedins in this market. Heck, the guy they played yesterday, Nathan McKinnon, right? Like, he was not a straight bar graph to the top. He had his struggles too as a young player. But you tell me, how much patience can an organization show for a player with this kind of talent on this kind of ticket who is now a year into a slump?
Well, more importantly, he's approaching the activation of a no movement clause on July 1st. So, first of all, what I would do in the case of Elias Pettersson is, now that this deal is done, I would bring him in, have a meeting with him, with the coach present. And, I've said this all along. I don't know what the issues were, but there obviously were issues that existed. And I would say to him, we've cleared the decks here, and you're the one who's staying. We made the election to keep you. It's now on you to become the player that we have expected you to be and who we're paying you to be. And if you don't become that player, we can't guarantee that you will necessarily be here in the future. And I would give him the time and give him the space and let him, and support, quite frankly, to let him be the best player that he can be. And then see how things go between now and the end of the season. And if you get to the end of the season and they're not satisfied with him, then you're going to the draft and you're trying to move him, I would think.
Yeah. One follow-up there, LG. He doesn't seem like the type of personality who has responded to pressure in the past.
Well, again, I'm giving it to
would
you.
underlining it heap more pressure on him, or is it just a matter of, you're an NHL player, a frontline center making $11.6 million. Like, at some point, you've got to learn to handle, deal, and succeed despite pressure.
I'm giving it to you in my inimitable, harsh manner. I would soft sell it a little more, but that would be the message that I would give to the guy. I actually think Elias Pettersson,
yeah.
Okay, I got it right. I don't think he's been as bad as everybody else does. Like, I watched that game against Detroit, and he nearly won it. He had the game on his stick, and Alex Lyons made an unbelievable save. And then Elias was out of gas, which caused him to be behind the play on the odd man rush, which led to the opening goal. But he could have been the hero of that game, but instead he's more or less the GOAT. And for what it's worth, in that game, I didn't think his line mates were very good, particularly Jake DeBrusk. But I think you got to just wait and see. Let this guy, let him play hockey. And I actually believe he's going to respond. I don't know what lingering issues are there with respect to his injuries that he's had. I don't think he has not looked like a player who has had any fun. I will tell you that in watching that team last night, they looked like a team that had the weight of the world lifted off their shoulders. They played with energy. They played with pizzazz. They played with speed. And, that spreads around. It's infectious in a hockey team. And hopefully he catches whatever that is and produces.
All right. We're out of time for this week, but I look forward to our discussions here on Wednesdays as we approach the deadline, because as everybody seems to concur, this is a very important month for the Vancouver Canucks, not just for this season, but going forward as well. Thanks, Laurence.
Hold on one thing. Patrick,
yes?
I need you to do me a favor.
Let's go.
Tell Ben Kuzma that Alexander Haig said hello.
Absolutely, will do.
You can talk about that one after I'm gone.
Yeah,
we'll
we sure
will.
One.
We sure will. Thanks, Laurence.
Okay, guys. Thank you very much.
Be well.
All right.
If you are struggling with things like managing stress, anxiety, relationships, or divorce, reach out to the counselors at Advanced Counseling. Book your free initial consultation today at advancedcounseling.ca.
So, Carson Price from the historic Wall Center, where? Turn game night into a game weekend? You can do it here. Book your stay at the Wall. Call 604-331-1000. Ask for the exclusive Carson and Price rate. Some blackout dates apply based on availability. And special shout out and thank you to the VPD And the public safety unit, I am told there was a protest here in the hotel, lower lobby level of the North Tower last night. Well,
Before rink-wide.
Yeah. So thank you for everybody assisting. Everything seems in order here, both
No
in the
broken
lobby
windows.
and in the studio. So very pleased about that. Thank you to everybody who helped in that matter. You can text this show, 778-402-9680. Email live at carsonprice.com. All to the Great Clips inbox. Great Clips. It's going to be great. The British Columbia Lions continue to re-sign some veterans in advance of CFL free agency on February 11th. Of course, we're in the legal tampering window, so you're seeing a lot of deals announced with players moving teams. But Jalen Edwards-Cooper, the corner, defensive tackle Marcus Moore, both regulars, if not every game starters for the Lions on defense in 2024, will be back. Still some work to do for the Ryan Rigman and administration. Michael Couture, Suk Chung, David Neville, the Canadian offensive lineman. David Mackey proved to be such a valuable piece as a fullback, occasional ball carrier, short yardage guy, blocker, special teamers. On defense, TJ Lee, Josh Archibald, and the punter, kickoff man, Flintoff. So we'll see what happens there. The CFL announced today that the cap is going up $400,000 per team based on $18 million in new revenue. The average salary in the CFL now is just shy of $135,000. I know some people crack on, it's such low paid, they need jobs in the off season. Well, $135K for 6 months of work, 4.5 hours a day, not so shabby. And yes, they do pursue other professions because they have a lot of time on their hands. They have the time
to do it. Good for them.
And of course, football careers are finite. They're pretty short, even in comparison to the other professional athletes. So we'll see what else could be coming down here with the Leos before February 11th. TSN and MLS have announced their broadcast schedule for 2025. A total of 41 matches on TSN. Principally fewer Vancouver Whitecaps matches, but they did identify, I don't think this is an exhaustive list, but several games that'll be on TSN. The MLS opener, February 23rd. Can you believe we're 2.5 weeks away from a regular season MLS match? Caps at Portland in the wild card rematch from last year. I'm sure the Timbers will want revenge for that 5-0 kicking they took in the wild card round. The home opener here at BC Place, March 2nd against the Galaxy, will also be on TSN. 2 other Cascadia games, May 31st against Portland. Unsure which Seattle match. And then there's a new expansion team in San Diego. And the Caps will play them June 25th, and that one will be on TSN as well. Of course, the rest are on Apple TV. You may have seen that MLS and Apple made an announcement last month. They will be calling more games off monitors. I'll let Mr. Price return and let us know what his and Paul Dolan's activities will be with the Whitecaps and MLS on Apple this season. Do you believe in bulletin board material?
Yes.
Okay.
Is there someone who's going to say no? Like they just ignore it?
The old CFL coach, Don Matthews, used to routinely, when, asked by the media, your so-and-so said this about the other team. So?
Fair enough.
Does that mean they're going to try harder? Do you think when the ball is actually kicked off, so-and-so is going to be like, I can't believe what he said about me Wednesday in the Gazette? I ask because some may know, we haven't had much occasion to talk about this recently, but once upon a time, Pat Riley was the head coach of the LA Lakers, not the executive in charge of the Miami Heat. They won back-to-back championships, and Riley was wise enough to trademark the term three-peat. Well, it has been revealed this week that the Kansas City Football Club and Pat Riley have struck a deal for commercial use of the word three-peat. And I am sure that has filtered to the Philadelphia Eagles practice field and locker room. Because you have to have that three-peat T-shirt ready right at the end of the game, right? We're talking about a club that can be the first in the Super Bowl era to win 3 in a row. The Packers won 3 in a row, but the first one was the NFL championship game, the pre-Super Bowl era. The Packers actually won 3 in a row back in the 20s as well. So Kansas City has the shirts, the hats, the whatever ready for Sunday as they seek history in Super Bowl 59.
I'm kind of amazed it's not included in his Wikipedia career highlights, which I'm looking at. Holder of
really
3-peat trademark. I'm sure it's at the bottom if I scroll. The bottom.
This has been known for some time,
but it should be at the very
it's
top.
Come up,
it's a very important item.
Well, this has come up in the past. Tampa Bay, right? Pittsburgh in hockey, Yankees in baseball. There have been teams that have won 2 in a row, and Pat Riley. Getting rich off the word 3-peat.
Undefeated. Pat Riley, undefeated in life.
He really is.
Just holy smokes.
Did you watch the HBO series on the Showtime Lakers? It was very campy.
Yeah,
but Adrian Brody.
I meant to. People enjoyed it. I meant to, and I can't remember. There was some child rearing reason that I forgot to look it up. But
Adrian Brody,
I will catch up.
Oscar nominated.
Yeah.
Adrian Brody in the role of Pat Riley.
Yeah.
I know you love your rugby sevens.
Yes,
it's the best party in town.
Yes,
we're celebrating 10 years here of the HSBC Rugby Sevens at BC Place. Happens February 21st to 23rd. Grab your friends, your fancy dress. 12 women's teams. 15 men's teams, both Canadian entries. Take to the pitch, 3 full days. Tickets starting on Friday. Single-day tickets starting at $45 plus fees, plus the one-day next-level rugby experience. VIP tickets from just $130. The best seats in the house, player access, private bar and lounge, access in-seat food and beverage. Tickets on sale now at vansevens.com.
That field level stuff. I mean, having been down there covering it.
Yes.
To watch it as a fan. I mean, that's a great spot in a lot of sports, but in rugby sevens, right there, and having the players coming and going and seeing all the emotion on their face, and hearing what the teams are saying to each other.
Rugby has a great culture of accessibility, of intermingling with supporters.
Yes.
I applaud them for it. Do you know how Canada is expected to fare?
Well, the women,
the women are usually pretty good, right? Usually
silver medalists, right? Like the women
Olympic
are
contenders.
Yeah, their new coach. I mean, the season they've had a couple tournaments. They're in a way rebuilding again. It's still a very young squad, so that's the impressive thing. I think that was the thing that kind of was notable last season was Jack Henry, who's no longer the coach, but came in to recognize he had a young group, had to reset things coming out of Tokyo. And everything hit all the marks. So they're going to be entertaining, exciting again. Of course, the men aren't on the series this year, so they've sort of created a secondary thing for them to play in.
So they're in tough.
They're in tough, but they want to get back in. There's a challenger series that they'll play in to try to qualify back on for next year. But yeah, I mean, the spectacle's all there. It's all the teams everyone's seen. There's going to be the Fiji element. There's going to be the New Zealand element. There's going to be South Africa.
It is quite a spectacle.
And,
particularly in the concourse.
Particularly in the concourse.
Poll question results, Mitsubishi poll question results from Tuesday. We asked, does JT Miller belong in the Canucks Ring of Honor? What says you, Patrick?
Well, there are a couple of people who are not, who have scored more points than him. Now, who might have had a case. I mean, I think Tony Tanti has a case.
Many still espouse Tony Tanti's case, including Farhan yesterday.
But Tony Tanti
highest scoring Vancouver Canuck not in the Ring of Honor, Tony Tanti. Todd Bertuzzi is the only other player with more points than JT Miller as a Canuck.
And I am comfortable with Todd Bertuzzi not being there. Obviously, stained his legacy. And JT Miller's exit is I think he was a great Canuck, and he was bound to be. I think he was bound for the Ring of Honor.
Yep, one of 2 point per game Canucks with Pavel Bure.
Fantastic player, did all kinds of stuff. And
6 years here.
We're kind of moving on already. It's kind of strange. But we'll see how the rest of the season plays out, right? But there's potential here for me just to be kind of like, yep, yeah, he was here.
70% said no. Incidentally, does Edler have a chance going forward, or was the one day retire and sign a contract as a Canuck? Is that it?
I mean, to me, he's of that old quality, right?
He's until Quinn Hughes, he was inarguably the best career for a Canucks defenseman.
Certainly, Gino Ojic, I think, has a lot of support. A lot of support, and I think rightly so.
Yeah. Do you think Kessler on the charm offensive and beloved now in Vancouver again has a shot?
Well, I mean, he's certainly in that.
See, here's the thing.
The floor for him is the Miller-Bertuzzi kind of situation, I think. So is he? He's probably above. He should be above that.
Yeah,
but obviously,
they put Sneps in. Yeah. They put Burroughs in.
Sneps isn't. Sneps was it has to be understood what a cult hero he was.
Correct.
For a very long time.
Well, both cult status. And Alex was a great player, don't get me wrong, who has scored one of the biggest goals in the history of the Vancouver Canucks, and everybody loved his story. But Ryan Kessler, JT Miller, better players than Alex Burroughs.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Alex Elder,
it's about your story as much as anything.
Than Matthias Olin and Harold Snaps.
It's about your story as much as anything.
Yep.
And I will just say this. This is why I've actually become quite an admirer of how the Blues handle it. They have a Hall of Fame. Are you right there, Matt?
No. Rogerson is staring at me. Did you want in on this, Mike? I know you're a big... No, he does not want.
I'm good. It's the Ring of Honor.
He was giving me the stink eye from I don't usually get that for content discussions. Show mechanics, I get that a fair bit, and rightfully so.
Thanks for interrupting, Mike.
Sorry. But Mike was like, I was like, oh my God, Rogerson wants in on this. Here comes a spitting hot take. Not so much. No.
The Blues. I just like how the Blues have
polish your Junos.
The Blues do a Hall of Fame.
Yes, they do.
They do it, and I think that's the way to. They have a ludicrous collection of retired numbers.
They do.
But
we always cite the St. Louis Blues, going like, would any fan from any other team go in there and recognize
every single plagiar? If I'm not mistaken,
recognize the names.
Yeah,
who the Blues have retired, but. You're allowed to celebrate your club history as you see fit. And while I am a small hall guy, and really that's now a lost cause with the Hockey Hall of Fame, I'm a small hall guy because for me, that's fans of the sport. That's fans of the sport at large, and you should be able to walk in there, and those names should, immediately you should see the faces, all of that. With club history, I'm a little more liberal. I'm a little bit more inclusive. Because people do come into markets, make their marks, and get remembered by specific communities. We still talk about some of the old. We still talk about some of the '94 Canucks, right? No, but honestly, it's been 30 years.
Yeah,
and if Cliff Ronning or Kirk McLean or, take your pick. Dave Babbage walks through the lobby here of the Wall Center. Someone is going to stop them and say, hey, 94.
I did it yesterday. I was sitting in the media room. And they had some sponsor skate at the rink, and so they had a quartet of Canucks legends: Corey Hirsch, Dave Babbage, Jyrki Lume, and Kirk McLean, and Dave came wandering in because he really poked his head in because where we do the
Dave
media,
is just a gregarious,
he's gregarious,
lovable
guy. But where the media space is next to where they had their gear, and Dave kind of poked his head. I said, Dave, it's funny to see you. I found myself watching a supercut of all the Canucks goals scored in the '95 playoffs, and you had a couple. He goes, well, I used to do that,
Yes, he did. Okay, so 70% of you said no on Miller. Cool Brown dude, second to Bure in points per game. He did not ask for a trade, but knew he needed one to move on. Was really good to the fan base. Tito, what a silly question. He was barely a Canuck. What did he accomplish that would deserve this honor? Well, again, 11th in club scoring, one of 2 point per game players, and 400 plus games as a Canuck. Powell, not before Bertuzzi and Kess. Corey, my heart says yes, my brain says no. Dom, maybe after being put in the penalty box like Kessler. And then Uncle Lalit, he belongs in a ring with EP40.
Ooh.
Errors and omissions from yesterday's program and beyond. And look, so these are going to serve as catch-alls. We're going to say this once. We're not going to litigate each and every specific error. It is Drew, not Kyle O'Connor. I've called him Kyle O'Connor like 2 or 3 times. Yes, it is now Elias versus Elias Pettersson.
With a cameo from Marcus.
Exactly. So we will have guests. We will have people who call Elias, and maybe even call Elias. I have a note that I said Filip Chytil wearing 71 for the Canucks. It's 72. And then who was it yesterday? Somebody mentioned Jim Rutherford at 74 years old. He's actually 76 later this month.
He's the same age as my dad.
My dad just celebrated his 80th yesterday.
Happy birthday, Mr. Sakara.
Yeah, we had quite a family celebration. It was terrific. All right, that's it for errors and omissions. We thank you for spending some time connecting with the show. Really appreciate that. Please do subscribe to all our assorted channels, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Follow on social. That's X, Insta, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Blue Sky Live on many of those platforms, noon Pacific time weekdays. And, of course, support the community sponsors you hear us talking about. Keep it local.